All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Politi here. Got to promise you this is going to be one of our rantiest rants ever. I'm just going to say up the top here, if you've got a weak heart, it's one of these signs at a ride, a great adventure. I would encourage you to skip to your next podcast, maybe something more soothing like American politics, because we're fired up. And I got to tell you, the loss was bad enough, right? That 100-71 loss to a good, not great Purdue team in March. Disgraceful defense, gave up, lack of heart, all that stuff. We're going to talk about all of that. But I want to start with something that I think is just inexcusable, unforced error. And that is the decision of Steve Pikiell not to address this, not to stand up there and take questions about this loss. And I just, again, you can think this is a minor thing, but you're a head coach of a program. You need to show accountability after a loss like that, and to send out Brandon Knight to take. I don't want to hear what Brandon Knight has to say about this. I want to hear Steve Pikiell. I want to know I want to hear his answers to this unacceptable performance in March by a team with two NBA players against a good, not great Purdue team to lose by 29 points. I'm sorry. And to put it in perspective, and I was thinking about this, can you imagine what we would be saying on this podcast if Rutgers football went to Purdue and lost, let's just say 40-14. And all of a sudden we're going in the press conference room and in comes the PR staff and they're like, okay, Coach Shannon's not available. Here's Kirk Shiraka. We'd lose our shit. Can you imagine? Number of times Chris Ash would probably have preferred not to. Chris Ash is not available. Coach Ash is not available today. Here's Andy Boo. Are you kidding me, Steve? Steve, you make $3.5 million a year. We are not, I am not Mike Wallace. Kevin Armstrong is not like going to grill you. Stand there, answer some questions about this. It's an unforced error, just complete stupidity. Adding on top of all the other shit that happened out there. Your team get disgraced. You're on the bus by 9:30. I'm sorry. And that really angered me. I thought, well, let me sleep on it. Let me see if I feel the same way when I wake up. I woke up even in a worse mood about it because it is such an unforced error, Brian.
Yes. Before I get into that, this is days after Steve Pikiell goes on the radio after a game, dropped 3 F-bombs, which are completely uncharacteristic for him. He's one of the most boring coaches ever after games, never says anything good or bad, and he obviously is unraveling, right? Like the pressure of all of this is hitting him to a point where he is like unraveling publicly, right? I'm sure he's had moments privately over the past couple months. It's finally coming out to the surface. In regards to the media, the truth is this program has been treated with kid gloves for the 8 years, right? Like people, the media, the fans, for the most part, have excused everything, every slip up, every bad result, every bad March, everything. Right, he hardly is challenged by us, I shouldn't say by us, by the media at large. And when we do challenge him, when I ask him a somewhat hard question, when I dare to tell him, hey, Steve, you've lost 3 games in a row, or when you ask him, what he's thinking when they're 500 in the middle of January, he throws his 3.2 GPA at you, and then he goes on an in-house podcast with a level of spin that would make the North Korean propaganda lady blush.
Right. That we don't go to hospital visits is what the spin was, right? I saw that one.
Hospital visits and working in homeless shelters, which I have seen zero evidence of them even doing, first of all. And second of all, am I supposed to sit outside the homeless shelter and cover it to get clicks? Like, am I supposed to just guess when they're showing up? No one's told me they go to hospital visits.
Every team in America goes to hospitals and homeless shelters. Every team.
The point is that finally, there's a point where even fans who accused everything, even the media for the most part accused everything, are finally trying to get some accountability, and nobody is stepping up. And I haven't heard anybody in the Rutgers program publicly say this season is a disaster. It's been a huge disappointment, which is objectively true. We are not living up to standards. It's like people expect the season to just go away, and it's like the 18-19 year where they were bad, but no one expected them to be good. Steve Pikiell goes up to the podium at Big Ten Media Day. He's asked about expectations, and he kind of scoffs at the question and says, what, we haven't had expectations here before? And yet, those expectations are not being met, and people are trying to hold him to account for the fact that they are falling woefully short. He's either not there or is dropping F-bombs on the radio. As far as road game press conferences, right? He didn't talk after the Michigan game. there was no one there. We didn't travel. No one else traveled.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of part of the deal with this team. It's another example of the size of this program where every other Big Ten program, for the most part, does pregame availabilities with the media. Rutgers has not had a single pregame availability this year. I've asked many times. They just do not do a scrum. It's just standard operating procedure. Purdue does it. Michigan State does it. Tom Izzo talks for 30 minutes before every game, right? He talks more than writers could possibly want to write before every game. Rutgers doesn't do it. And then on the road, no one travels. So a lot of the times, he just doesn't do a post-game press conference. Kevin Armstrong was there yesterday. We had a guy there. We paid hundreds of dollars to fly out a reporter to be at Purdue to suffer through a horrible game.
Just a waste of money, setting money aflame. Is that what that was?
And he stands outside the locker room and is told, Steve Pikiell isn't going to talk to you. Here's Brandon Knight. I mean,
Brandon Knight, who then tells us that, well, Purdue just made shots. Oh, go. That's what happened. Oh, gee. Go. Good, great basketball. Great ball. Just throw this one away. Move on to the next one. You're 14-16, Brandon, and it's not his fault. You shouldn't be talking to us at all. But I don't want to hear from Brandon Knight. Here's Steve Pikiell, Pat.
Of course, Purdue did make a lot of shots. Let's be clear about that. That is true.
Shots,
but they were wide open shots. Is the point? The defense was just abysmal. The heart, as you mentioned, was abysmal. And yes, Purdue did knock down a lot of shots. They had a great game, but whatever. That's not even the point of the first 10 minutes of this podcast, which should be, like you said. I love the point you made, the comparison to Greg Schiano, because that's something that he would never do because he understands the power of his voice and the leadership that it brings and that defining characteristic that he has, and how to win over people, what leadership and whether it's the governor or whomever is listening, there's that I'm the man in the room. Greg Schiano has that. I'm sure Steve Pikiell has some of it, but this is an example where he's clearly lacking that ability. There's no question.
I mean, it's Greg Schiano against UCLA. Like this, here he is. Right. Okay, we're going to see what this guy says. You got embarrassed in homecoming by a shitty Big Ten. Okay, here we go. Here's what he's going to say. Well, guess what? Call your shot. That's when that happened. Yeah, right. That's when that happened. And all of us looked at it and said, all right, okay. He set the agenda for the team after that game. What's the agenda for this team? Brandon Knight, well, they hit a lot of shots. Oh, okay, great. All right, you're 14-16. You might not. I mean, I'm sorry, and I get it. It's a small thing, and let's talk about the big thing, which is that this team is just a hot mess. I mean, we could talk about that, but it's just such an unforced error. I can't get over that.
Yes, it's dumb. Greg Schiano, listen, he hasn't been perfect, right? Like Nebraska, he stormed off after a few questions when we kept insisting on, coach, but he was in the podium and talked to us. That's the bare minimum that one could expect.
Of course.
And it sets the tone for the program. Yeah. Obviously this is in reverse order, but when we went to Penn State, Ace Bailey had an insane game, but 2 technicals, they lose that game. The only person on earth that should talk after that game is Ace Bailey, and yet he's able to scamper out of the locker room, go to the bus. No one makes him talk
18. At least he's 18. I get that. I get that to a level.
I understand Ace Bailey. The point is there has to be an adult in the room that tells Steve Pikiell, that tells Ace Bailey, you have to talk to Brian Fonseca and Kevin Armstrong, who again are not Walter Cronkite. We're not people that we're not going to hold them to the flame here. We're just asking them questions about what happened. It's just a lack of accountability. That's what I keep getting down to. And it's going to be interesting how this leads to the future, right? And clearly this is part of the issues in the past where, these things don't happen by accident. This is the second straight losing regular season for this program. The first time since they had 13 straight losing regular seasons. I did not realize it was that bad before.
Is that right? Wow.
13 straight. Right. On the basketball, the defense was shocking. People want to point to the effort and the heart, which sure, by the 10 minutes left, everyone gave up because they were down 30 points, whatever. Right. That's everyone wants to point to that because that's easily fixable, right? Just try harder. Just try a little bit harder. You'll be better. The issue is that they couldn't guard inside. Lathan Summerhill was left on an island against Trey Kaufman-Renn, who could have scored 1,000 points if he wanted to. If they dumped the ball inside to him every time, he would score 9 times out of 10, right? Even in single coverage, right, where you have 4 guys on the perimeter, they were getting open 3-point shots. I think Robbie Hummel put it perfectly. It was 5-on-0, right? All they'd have to do is run one ball screen with Braden Smith, put one guard through the blender, and the entire infrastructure of the defense falls apart. They were getting guys open everywhere they wanted. Braden Smith looked like Steve Nash on steroids during the 7 seconds or less era. He was, and listen, he's the best player in the Big Ten, no doubt about it. But they made him look unbelievable.
Right.
And the thing is, I thought this was also interesting. Just the final point on the pregame, postgame talking thing. Steve Pikiell did do the pregame radio, so he wasn't suspended for dropping F-bombs against Michigan. Just to clarify that point.
No, it's going to suspend him.
I heard people have brought that up. Aaron Brayman in his excellent podcast this morning thought maybe the FCC might have clamped down on him. Anyway, the point is,
FCC.
Is there still an FCC? We haven't doged the FCC yet. Elon Musk, if you're starting somewhere, the FCC still exists. I'm sorry, another podcast.
This is what happens when you go on WFAN. You sign a deal with the FAN. People actually listen to the radio show. So before the game, I don't know if you guys had seen Matt Painter's press conference, masterclass talking about the defense they play and all this stuff, right? Like how they're, switching, whatever. So Steve Pikiell in the pregame radio show, start talking about, we're going to ice some ball screens. We're going to do some blacks, some softs, play soft coverage. Talking, some rudimentary basketball things he never goes into. And he's like, I hate talking about this stuff because people don't get it, but it's important against Purdue. And then his team goes on to commit the second least efficient defensive performance in the Ken Pom era century. His worst defensive performance as a head coach. I just thought that was kind of funny. But the truth is, his team looked completely lost on what it had to do. No one knew where to go, and it resulted in Purdue. Matt Painter is the classiest coach in the Big Ten because if he wanted to, they could have scored 700 points.
Of course, easily. Yeah. Yeah, part of the walk-ons. We watched the Purdue walk-ons get a layup drill for 7 minutes at the end of that game. And the one thing I heard, Pat, and I don't want to hear this. This is funny. Like people, that was an Eddie Jordan type. Let me tell you something. Eddie Jordan never had 2 NBA lottery picks in his lineup. Eddie Jordan didn't have 10 years in the Big Ten behind him. Didn't have all the facilities. Didn't have the contract that Steve Pikiell has. Eddie Jordan coached with one hand tied behind his back. And yeah, he was bad. It was a bad time for Rutgers basketball. But don't say, oh, it was like Eddie Jordan. I'm sure Eddie Jordan's watching that and saying, oh, yeah, I wish I had Dylan Harper. Dylan Harper can't defend. I mean, it's incredible. You got these guys. That's the other part about this, Pat. Like the thing that just, you're a defensive coach. How is Dylan Harper that bad on defense in game 30? Not game 2. Game 30. He was terrible on defense. Foul 3-point shooter, flying out, every ball, every fake.
It was amazing that it was so bad when they did the second half line swap, like the Devils would do. They swapped everyone out. I think they were down 20 at that point. And they switched to a 2-3 zone for one possession, and then they get a wide open 3 or something. And he missed, I think.
He may, of course.
Yeah.
Steve Pikiell pulled his goalie and switched it with somebody else at that point. Yeah.
So I was just like, wow, this really is the defining. People are going to remember this game as like a wow.
Right.
This is like the face of how bad it's gotten. This is the absolute skid mark of a horrible year.
Yeah, it feels that way to me. And I don't want to, I get it. Like you lose at Purdue, you probably got to lose that game, even if this team was good. I understand that. But it does feel like an inflection point to me, Brian. I don't know if you agree with that statement, that this is sort of like when we're doing the autopsy of this season, we're going to look back on that. I don't know. I think Pat's right.
I just think the team stinks. This is just an example, 100,000, the most egregious one, obviously, of a bad basketball team. Right? Like there's no excuses here. The entire team's healthy, right? You feel like you're playing well. You're sending, you're showing the team text messages from other teams about, playing music as an orchestra or whatever motivational nonsense we're throwing out late in the season. And the truth is, the team just stinks. I don't want to hear about, hangover from the Michigan heartbreaker. I don't want to hear how they played well for 10 minutes or whatever spin is going to come out. The team is bad. It cannot defend a lick. And even when they're scoring, first 10 minutes were the same thing as the Michigan game, just a little bit shorter, where they're scoring really well. They're hitting threes, they're hitting shots, and they're up by 2 points or 8 points or whatever, because on the other end, every 2 that Lincoln Somerville scores, he gives up 4 on the other end, right? Like, and that's Lincoln Somerville, because the entire team is horrible defensively. Horrible, right? The only redeemable thing about this basketball team are 2 or 3 things. Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper offensively, right? Who are, again, the greatest offensive players Rutgers will ever have. And it's just amazing that they're wasting this team. Lincoln Somerville offensively is pretty freaking good, man. Like, he shows some things where he could be one of the best offensive centers in the Big Ten if they can clean out the kinks, have him pass out the post every once in a while, don't take some really, really, really stupid shots, forced shots, mid-range shots. But the issue is that I don't know what his defensive ceiling is, and that's the truth for the entire roster, right? Like, I couldn't tell you 5 things this team does well. I couldn't.
Yeah, no. He said it well. Yeah, I'm at sort of at the where do you go from here point of this? Like, all right, so you got Minnesota as the last game. There's no, anyone who thought that, this team's going to be a tough out in March. And this team's not going to be a tough out in March. This team's going to be, see you later in March. I get a Big Ten tournament. It looks, they're going to make it. It looks like, and I'm going to cite Max from the RU Screw Pod. I hope his math is right, but less than a 1% chance at this point that they don't make it, according to all the things that have to happen for them not to get there. They're going to make it to Indianapolis. They'll have a shot. They did the bare minimum that we were talking about, but this team's going to win. If they lose to Minnesota, they will win as many games as last year's team. Incredible. In the Big Ten, they'll be 7-13. It's just incredible to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to know about their chances of making the Big Ten. Iowa has to beat Michigan State, who's going to win the Big Ten. Iowa's not going to beat Michigan State. As soon as that result goes final, Michigan State wins, Rutgers is in the Big Ten tournament, which, funny enough, I've seen the reaction for most people, Aaron Brightman and a lot of the fan base, almost begging them not to make the tournament. People want the season to be over. They don't want to watch any more Rutgers basketball. They're disgusted by what they see. They just want to move on, which, again, is from going to where we were in September to that. I think that's a perfect illustration of just how badly they botched this.
Yeah. And I wonder, Pat, if that loss to Michigan, because we haven't had a show since they went to Michigan, the heartbreak on the buzzer beater, a 30-point shot. A game they played well. Like they did play okay there offensively, at least. Didn't give up 100 points. I guess that's good defensively. I wonder if that was just it. That was the one. That was the kick. That was the one to pull the plug on the whole thing.
That's the maddening part of this whole experience because, and this is, I remember talking to the fans about this a lot too. It's like, well, after USC, you're like, all right, we could see this team score 95 points and you could see, all right, maybe we can win game. Maybe Rutgers can win games 95-90. And then Rutgers comes back and it has that game against Michigan. And you're just like, they handled the paint really well against Michigan. And that was totally surprising. The thing that just bad teams are just inconsistent. And that's what Rutgers was all season long. Like there was zero consistency ever. And that's probably the biggest knock on Pikiell from top down. There was zero consistency. Like what was this team from the beginning? The first 2 weeks of the season, you had no idea, right? He had no idea. And that is a huge glaring red mark for me. I don't know if that, I guess if you're a Rutgers fan and you're not going to watch the Big Ten tournament, then that's pretty wild. To see where this thing has fallen. I'm pretty shocked to hear that reaction, but
I can't blame them. That's for sure.
After that, but it's just like the parallels of the two is crazy because I'm sure after the Michigan game, those same people were saying, "Oh man, we're right there, we're right there with the best team in the conference," and then a few days later, it's the worst team on earth after one of the worst losses we've seen, and definitely under Pikiell.
The reason I can't see this team making any sort of run is you watch the first half against Purdue, you watch the first half against Michigan, right? Like Rutgers goes down the floor. Every shot they take is impossible. It's a tough mid-range jumper. It's a 3-pointer with a guy's face. It's a one-on-one where you're asking somebody to create something out of nothing. And then you go on the other end of the floor, and Purdue is getting any shot they want. Any shot they want. Again, Purdue is an above-average, excellent offensive basketball team, right? Michigan is an above-average, excellent basketball team with interesting, difficult matchups. And they're going against the Rutgers defense. It's important to note. I think if Rutgers offense went against Rutgers defense, the same issue would happen where they just cannot manufacture easy shots. And when they do, when they have an alley-oop for a dunk, they botch that. In the second half, the first alley-oop they threw to Dylan Grant, he couldn't throw it down because of a bad pass. It's just they struggle so much to create anything easy offensively. And the only thing they have that is consistent in scoring is Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper going ISO. And it's almost impossible. I mean, to wrap up this point, in the first half against Michigan, they made 19 of 23 shots. That was the hottest stretch of basketball I have ever seen Rutgers have, ever. I mean, it's almost impossible to do
Yeah.
better. God, everyone was hitting shots. Jermichael Davis, Jeremiah Williams, Ace, Dylan, everybody. Emmanuel Bole had a dunk, I'm pretty sure, in that stretch. Everyone was hitting shots. You go into halftime, you're only up single digits, and then you blow the game.
Of course.
That to
Right.
me is the
'Cause they
microcosm
can't-
of the entire season.
Unsustainable. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I know people are circulating, and after every game now, I love the shot charts are always on, and Michigan's shot chart was basically perfect. And I'm looking at the Purdue shot chart, and like somebody took a corner 18-footer, and it was so out of character that I'm like, oh, I remember that shot. I remember thinking at the time, whoa, that wasn't a 3-pointer. That wasn't in the paint. Something went terribly wrong. Matt Painter's going to make that kid do sprints.
Rutgers had 27 other twos against Michigan. Other twos meaning not at the rim. 27. Michigan had 0.
Oh, you're going to be kid 0.
Against the thing is, I watched Lathan Somerville take mid-range jumpers with 20 seconds left on the shot clock when he's one of 20 on the year. I'm pretty sure that's the number. Something absurd like that. How is he allowed to do that? How, as a coach, do you allow a guy to do? I think Matt Painter would have yanked him out of the game. I know you probably don't have other options, right? What's the opposite? Emmanuel Bole, who spends pregame warmups trying threes, which he's never tried in an actual game. But I mean, at some point, you got to make a point of like that shot is not allowed. You can't take that shot. Patrick, what did Patrick Ewing say? Have you ever shot that shot? You shouldn't be allowed to take that shot. And it's just, it feels like people have made this point. It's not an original point. It feels like Rutgers playing offensive basketball from 1990, and everyone else is playing basketball in at least 2015.
Right. Yeah. And as Steve Pikiell right when he said the offense is certainly better than the defense. But yeah, man, the offense has been this way for a long time. The defense it's a new thing.
The offense is only good because you have 2 NBA players in it. That just to be clear, like the offense, they keep talking about like how they're scoring 80 points, which they haven't done in like 30, 35 years or whatever. Yeah, because you have 2 NBA players on your roster who, in spite of the offensive system they play in, are scoring at ridiculous rates. And because this is another important note, Rutgers defense was really good back in the last few years. One, because they were good, but because they would just grind teams down. Opponents would have to go 30 seconds into the shot clock to get a shot, right? Which kills clock, which reduces the amount of possessions per game, which gives your offense less chances to score. Rutgers gives up such easy baskets so quickly defensively that they have more possessions to work with, which is why they're scoring more, because they just have more opportunities. That's an important note. It's not because the offense is suddenly better. It's because you have elite players and more chances.
Right. All right. Deep breath. Do we want to move on to another topic here? I thought we talked about the GM position. We didn't not really had a chance to dive into it, and it became a thing, a Rutgers social media thing, which is always fun. If you're not on social media, you might not have gathered all of the talk about what the GM position is going to be and defining that position for Rutgers. Ryan Passari told me that I asked him directly about getting Steve Pikiell help in this position. He said it's going to happen. As far as I know, they have not advertised the job, but there's a lot of speculation of what the job's going to be. And I think it's important to get some clarity on it, because in having that conversation with Ryan Passari, to me, people are maybe thinking this is going to be more than it's going to be, is the best way to put it. I think he was looking for something to take the pressure. I'm guessing football is going to get one too, to take the pressure off the head coaches, who have told us time and time again since the NIL era dawned that they spend 60-70% of their time on raising money and dealing with NIL and in a fundraising position and not coaching their sport. And that's to me, the sense I got was, if you're looking for them to hire someone who's going to make analytical decisions, and the way I've seen, at Carolina or other programs are spending millions of dollars on this, that ain't what's happening here. Right. So, I mean, it's like if Rutgers fans should be used to managing their expectations and a lot of things. And I think this is a good example of it, that this position is really going to be someone who's going to take a lot of this stuff off the plate of people, of the coaches, which means to me, the first things you've got to be able to do is handle the salary cap, handle negotiating contracts, and handle getting more money into the program. Those are 3 things that this position is going to be. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think I'm missing something here?
No, I think you're spot on, and it makes sense. Like, would Greg Schiano hand over all the scouting and analytics? There's 0% chance. There's a million people already doing that job within the program anyway. So adding another person to do that role and be their boss, I don't think makes a whole lot of sense. I think Schiano kind of like relishes in his ability to evaluate talent as well. So like that whole talent evaluator idea kind of doesn't exist in a Shiano world, in my opinion. I think just a big part of what is fueling the fan speculation about this topic is what's happening at other programs, and it becomes a big publicity stunt, right? Like Andrew Luck was the first one to sign, or the first Stanford signed Andrew Luck to this position, and obviously he comes with such celebrity appeal and things like that. So I think there's just a misunderstanding of exactly what you're saying. Like, where's our Andrew Luck? Is it gonna
Woj bomb? Where's our? Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
So in football, I agree with you, Pat, because they have like entire scouting departments. I'm sure if they don't already, they should have like an entire department just watching other college football teams and scouting potential portal players that you can kind of pick up, right? Like guys in the lower ranks, the FCS, the lower G5 teams. And I mean, I don't know if they do, I really don't know, but clearly the haul they have this year shows that they have really concentrated on those lower levels. Basketball wise, they certainly don't have that infrastructure, right? I could be wrong here. I don't think there's a guy watching Summit League basketball in January so that they can tell Steve Pikiell, hey, this kid, he might enter the portal. He's going to be really good. But that's what you need, I think. You need a guy that is a guy in a staff that is able to pour over the stuff so that when the portal does open in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, whenever it does, you are prepared and ready to go and attack these guys that you've zero in on. Because I think a lot of these high-level basketball programs already do that. And if you don't do that, you're behind the 8 ball. I can't imagine Steve Pikiell and his assistants who are so busy doing game prep and scouting reports for a game every 3 days in February are spending time watching film of, again, like a high mid-major team looking for players for next season. They're trying to figure out this season's team, right? I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. Expectations need to be tempered. I think this season on the court is perfect example of people getting over their skis. I mean, ourselves included, right? We were talking about this team maybe making a Final Four. Maybe everyone should just pump the brakes with everything going forward with Rutgers. I think the money part, sure. That was probably more important 2 years ago. I mean, listen, they hired a guy from Altius that was supposed to kind of help with these corporate partnerships, and I haven't heard. I heard his hiring. It's been 2 years. I haven't heard from the guy since, right? So, they need a guy who can provide money, but I think the money doesn't matter when you don't have people in place to know where the money should be spent, and more importantly, on top of all that, and this could also come from shifts in the coaching staff. Somebody needs to be around Steve Pikiell and help him have a fresh look at things and, kind of push back on, like, this isn't a good idea. This is a good idea. Maybe we should structure this. Because the truth is this. Steve Pikiell is going to be the one coaching this team, right? It's amazing to me. 2 or 3 years ago, if anyone suggested Steve Pikiell would not be coaching this team, people will be up in arms about Steve Pikiell is the greatest coach this program has had in years, best coach since Tom Young. And now all the talk about Steve Pikiell, people only bring up, you can't fire him because there's no AD and his buyout is enormous. People aren't talking about the basketball acumen. They're talking about how hard it is to fire the guy. I think that's a great example of how far he's fallen. Anyway, the point is he needs someone in his ear to be like, listen, Steve, you can't be doing this. You got to be doing this. Got to be doing that.
Yeah, right. He needs to rebuild his staff in a lot of ways, and that's something that's going to have to happen. And I'll be very interested to see. And this is what you get into a situation where you don't have. Apologies to Ryan Passari, who I like. You don't have someone who is who's a real athletic director, in a permanent position, who can go to Steve Pikiell and say, "You got to make changes on your staff," and have these hard conversations. Not, yeah, you should consider it. No, you got to do it. This is not good enough now. We have proven now. We have gone, and we've done this illustration. You love to talk about, well, I've got this team to 3 consecutive NCAA tournaments, including one that didn't happen. Okay, great. But you went from 32 to first 4 to NIT to miss. Like, it's unacceptable. Any place else on earth, they are charting a way to get out of that contract. That's the reality of it. Go around Power 5 places. They are looking. You think it's a crazy conversation for Rutgers fans to have? It is not a crazy conversation for Rutgers fans to have. They'd be having. You think they'd be having that at Auburn? They wouldn't be having it. He'd be gone. That's just the reality of it, right? And I'm not. You've got one NCAA tournament win in 9 years, right? So you've got to do something here. You've got to do something about this. You've got to change the course of this. If he's too stubborn to see that, we're going to be talking about the next AD is going to have a coaching search here. It's the reality of it.
A few things. I'm tired of the 3 NCAA tournaments. I'm tired of it. The one thing no one ever brings up is this. If they had the tournament in 2020, right, then Geo Baker, Ron Harper, Caleb McConnell wouldn't have an extra year to be able to bring Rutgers to the 2022 NCAA tournament.
That's
right?
a great point.
Play out the butterfly effect. People.
Why have I not thought of that? That's a very funny. I've never thought of that. Yeah, that's a good point.
We exist in alternative realities, okay? If they made the 2020 tournament, Lord knows they think the 2022 tournament because they blew the chance of going to a 23 tournament with an even better team. They played a Cam Spencer game-winning 3 at Purdue yesterday. I cannot imagine the Rutgers fans' reaction watching that. My reaction was, oh my God, Rutgers used to be a pretty decent basketball team back in the day. On expectations, that's the issue here is the expectations, right? Like, to your point, every other program or any other winning program in the country would look at this and say this is unacceptable. Rutgers is clinging on to the fact that this is the one guy that took him to the tournament for the first time in 30 years. And no one is looking beyond that and saying this should be better. This could be better. We're in the position, we're in the Big Ten, we're getting full revenue share, we have a practice facility, we have a great home court advantage. There are so many things positive around this program that we're paying really good salaries. We're paying an assistant coach a really good salary. There's a lot to sell here at Rutgers. And listen, I'm not advocating that Steve Pikiell should be fired tomorrow, right? But I think the conversation is completely fair because they are falling well short of expectations. I think someone brought it up yesterday, and they make a great point. The last 2 years were completely excused because it was like, hey, listen, we might have missed the NCAA tournament in spectacular, embarrassing fashion, but Ace Bailey committed in January. He'll be here in 2 years. And then last year, they were horrible, but it's okay. Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper are coming next year. Everything will be okay. Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper are here, and they failed again. There's no more looking forward to next year, which looks even worse on paper at this moment. We could be talking about a Seton Hall-esque year next year, right? Yeah. So the hope is gone. All your cachet is gone, and now you got to rebuild it. This is going to be, to me, a test of, is Rutgers a winning athletic department? Are they able to recover from this? How do they react to this entire situation? That, to me, is going to be a humongous litmus test of, can Rutgers win in the modern era and reverse decades of being a loser athletic department?
All right. Should we take some questions? We've got some good questions from the Discord. Let's see if and we have a lot of people just screaming the same thing, but we have some questions, and let's start with wrestling, Pat, just to cleanse the palate. It's like when they give you that little gelato and whatever it's called.
Yeah. Mezza. So
cleanse
the palate. Yeah.
Because at this point, all of the NIL money should go to Goody for what's he's our John Wooden. Question: Can we get a Big Ten wrestling championship preview from Lanny? Who can surprise? Who may stumble? Odds of all 10 getting through. Okay, all right, Pat. They've lost one of their best wrestlers, so that's going to make it a little harder. What do you got?
So, I think on the odds of everyone getting through is pretty much less than 1%. But I think the over under out of 10 weight classes, a good number is 7. I think 7.5 is a fair line of all right, there are 6 guys that are certainly going to make it, and then 3 that are bubble guys. So I think that 7.5 is a good number. Dean Peterson, 125. He's a veteran guy. He had a really good Big Ten tournament last year. He's going to be seeded fairly well. He's come back strong this season. He's wrestling really well. I like him a lot. Joey Olivieri at 141. Tough weight class, but he's a tough kid. Has wrestled well in a bounce back year. And then, Dylan Shawver, a guy that won a Big Ten title last year, was a little bit of a surprise story. Has had a good season, not a great season, but he knows how to turn it on when the lights are bright. So I think those are some good names to watch for. Who can who might slump? I don't know. It's hard to say, but I'm intrigued to see PJ Casale. You mentioned Rutgers isn't going to have one of their best guys. Of course, you're talking about John Pesnansky, who's just kind of, his career has kind of come to an end with injuries, and but he's going to be replaced by PJ Casale at 197 pounds. And that's a whole another really interesting story. His whole background, PJ Casale was a great wrestler coming out of Del Barton and Passaic Valley High School at the end. And just has had some up and downs with the team and some personal things. And for him to get this opportunity is really special. So he'll be the 14 seed. He'll be seeded last. It'll be really hard for him to kind of make it through or to have a nice run. But I think if it's not this year, next year, he might be a really good guy to follow and learn more about that story. So I think when you're talking about the consistency of a program and like things that are going really well, Rutgers had maybe its most consistent year ever in wrestling this year under Goodale. And that has kind of been swept under the carpet a little bit by what's everything else that's going on. And it's been a very good year. It just hasn't had that there hasn't been that Nick Soriano or Anthony Ashnell type wrestler to make it an exponentially great season. But I think like from a consistent standpoint, they're ranked number 12. They've been right in the mix all season long. And then it's just a very consistent year. And if you're like a fan of wrestling and you like following sports that are just gonna be there every year and keep you satisfied, like this is your team. This is like the greatest thing on earth. This is the arsenal of
will Rutgers have a Big Ten champ? Will they get one? If you're gonna put money on anyone, I would say Dean Peterson's gonna be seated in the top 4 at 125. It's always a very wild weight class, but he's one of the experienced guys in that class now, and I think he could maybe win one. So, but if I had to say, I'd say probably not. I love the 125.
What was that?
I said I love the 125 weight class. It's like I weighed that when I was in 5th grade. I think that's in the, I think anyway. Go. Sorry, Brian.
No, that's all right. Well, in 5th grade, you were probably 5'5" like a lot of these guys. So it's easier to be 125 when you're anyway. To your last point, like I remember last year we were talking about Scott Goodale hitting a ceiling, like the program not taking that next step, and yet they're very consistent, right? Like they may not exceed, but they never go below. And I think a lot of programs would love to be on that. Oh man,
even when adversity hits, like you lose John Poznanski, they lost Brian Saldano this year. What's the excuse? No, it's the next man up has a really good season, like Shane Cartagena Walsh and PJ Casal come out of the woodwork. That's the infrastructure of a great program.
No doubt.
Right. Another question about Ryan Passari. In your professional opinion, what percentage chance does Ryan Passari have of becoming the official AD? I think it goes down. It goes down every loss. I don't know. I'm going to put it at 20%, 25%. I don't think it's a great chance anymore. And I just keep on coming back to this. So if Rutgers is going to wait till it hires an athletic director, wait till it hires a president, right? Before it hires an athletic director. And the president's going to come in. And is that guy going to say, oh, we need to keep going here. We need to roll with this. Like this guy, if this guy's coming from the outside, if he's unfamiliar with Rutgers, and maybe he's not, maybe he's someone who, already is somewhere out there, a Rutgers person who knows what's going on here. It's possible. I don't know who that person is, but it's possible. Still, you're going to come in here and say, yeah, we got to roll with this. I think you're probably going to want to bring in your own guy. They must do a national search. And I just maintain that search is going to produce some good candidates because it is a good job. It really is. Do you guys disagree? 25, you're going higher or lower? Give me the card sharks. Higher than 25. What do you got?
When you said 20%, go ahead, Pat, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to say over just because of the way that everything is unfolded here, but not by much. Like
it's fair.
I think Ryan Passari understands it really well. Everything's positioned well. I feel like he's done a good job getting Rutgers positioned for this next year and what's coming. So I think at least from that, I think it would be really detrimental for Rutgers to lose Ryan Passari.
Oh, I agree with that totally.
Right. Yeah. So in the best case scenario, there's he's still going back to his deputy role, I think is the best case scenario. So I think it's maybe 33% chance that he ends up being 1 of 3.
Those numbers strike me as astronomical. And then I remember that this is Rutgers after all. Yeah. So a competent athletic department was going to be my comeback. A competent athletic department probably does not keep an interim AD as a permanent AD. And a competent athletic department also does not have their AD leave in scandal and thrust the interim athletic director in 2 weeks before the start of the school year and put him in an impossible position. right? Like, I think it's impossible to judge Ryan Passari because what could he possibly do in the spot? It's listen, he was around for a long time. He was around Pat Hobbs. He has an idea of the place, right? But it's one thing to be the second guy. It's another thing to be in the hot seat.
Right. He's been standing there with a fire hose, putting out fires left by his predecessor for most of the last 6 months. So yeah, absolutely.
Still, I just don't think there's no scenario in an ideal world where Ryan Passari is the permanent AD. I really don't. Is it possible? This is Rutgers. Anything is possible at Rutgers except consistent winning.
Wow. Yeah, fine. That came out of nowhere. That one. That was all right. We're still going. We're still hot. That was like the embers. You think you've got things to fires out, and all of a sdsudden it's it's blurred again. All right, more questions here. We do you want to answer a lacrosse question? I can't do it. Can you do it? Is lacrosse Brecht finally being exposed as not that good? I mean, certainly Brian Brecht did not capitalize on that Final Four berth. I saw the goalie scored a goal. That was good. It's like Martin Brodeur shooting one in. Second Devils reference on this podcast. I know we've got some crossover Devils Rutgers fans. That's two of them for you. Devils are in trouble too, though. Unfortunately, 3.
Is Jack Hughes out for a long term, or I saw that hurt?
Doesn't look great for Jack Hughes. Yeah, doesn't look
not great.
Not great. Shoulder separation. Okay.
These hockey guys play through everything, so he'll be back. I don't know the answer to the question. I think they've undoubtedly cratered after that Final Four. I mean, they've been bad, especially compared to expectations. I think there is always this issue of expecting linear progress. This team goes to the Final Four. People expect it to be a Final Four contender every year instead of looking at it as like one really special year, the end of a cycle where you had these veteran guys who were around the program, successful, and they finally broke through. I just think he was unable to maintain that success in the transfer portal and building a foundation that would continue that. So, I mean, to answer the question, I don't know if he's been exposed. I think it's clear that they've severely what's the word I'm looking for? Underperformed relative to what people thought they could do after going to the Final Four.
Yeah, I think Brian made a great point of like that special season was also a byproduct of the veteran guys on the team, but also the extra eligibility of Ivy League players that they were able to pull in the pipeline that, right, like they couldn't go back to Princeton. There's no graduate program there. So Rutgers pulled all these guys. They had an incredible run there with adding talent. And I'm fairly certain they still are a little bit, but I think that was a big part of the really, really booming success there.
Right. Brecht was way ahead of the curve there.
Yeah,
way ahead. I think other teams have kind of caught up to that. And again, it was a confluence of, they got an elite goalkeeper that year. Yep. They had goal scorers. I don't think Adam Charlambides was still on that team, but they had another guy whose name is escaping me, who was a really good long-time player. Like, they looked out in guys coming back for 6th, 7th years of eligibility, and to Pat's point, just way ahead of the transfer curve on the Ivy Leagues. And they haven't been able to counter other teams, figuring it out. And the NIL situation, obviously, I don't think the NIL situation is crazy in lacrosse, but the elite programs probably do have a little bit more of a purse than Rutgers does. And I don't follow lacrosse. I think having 1 or 2 really special players does make a big difference. So that's my.
It does in most sports. I know that. All right, some more questions. This was a good mean Rutgers. As reporters, what is the harshest criticism, meanest comments you have received from angry Rutgers folks? I don't know. I've been accosted in I was in a restaurant eating some eggs once. This is one of my favorites. Just having there, and this woman walked behind me, and she sees me, and I'm just again having my omelet, and she's looking at me like you're too negative. You're too negative, and she's walking behind me, and I'm just sitting there putting butter on my toast. I'm like, do you want to sit down and have a cup of coffee? That's the stuff that always amazed me. I'm sitting right here. If you want to have a conversation, I'm by myself. I'm reading the newspaper, having breakfast. We can talk about it. That's always she's walking away. No, don't go, please. I'm lonely. That's always the stuff. That's always the stuff that amazes me. The people who come up in person and talk to you like they're sending you an email. I don't think it's me. It's not me, but it's you can have an actual conversation about it. I'm standing right in front of you. I don't think there's been. I don't know. I think most part, Rutgers fans have been quite kind to me, to be honest with you. I've made a lot of friends in the Rutgers fan base. I don't think there's anybody, any really mean thing. Message boards crap is different. That's just, what about you, Brian? You've had some rough moments over the past few years. Any mean things?
I'm not really fans, mostly just assistant coaches of high profile programs, but that's another thing.
Far as I know, he is the face of the program right now. I don't know what you're talking about, assistant coach.
I'm fascinated to know what would happen if I made the trip instead of Armstrong. But
that's the one thing. It's the one thing I regret about last night is that
I wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly.
I would have had quite the list of questions. Anyway, yeah, I was gonna mention like the message boards are like the fringe of the fan base. And our emails are probably the fringe of the fan base, right? It's like some restaurants only have negative reviews because the people that are emboldened to put reviews are the people that hate it so much they have to these are the fans that hate us so much they have to email us. But to your point, you make an excellent point. Like I never thought of this, but people always say, "Oh, you're too negative. Oh, you hate Rutgers. All this and that." They never point to a specific thing you wrote or a specific point you said or anything. It's just like, "Oh, like you're too negative in general." And I just would love for them to have a follow up. Like, what did I write that's negative? What did I write that's wrong? What did I
now
write
we're not negative enough for people. That's the funny part about it. Now, right now, they're like, "Oh, you guys, when are you guys going to start asking hard questions?" Well, we could, but the coach's not available, and I'd love to.
Well, that's the seesaw of this, right? Where when we're negative during them being, okay to mediocre, it's like, "Oh, you're negative. NJM has to die. So the Star Ledger should be dead." Blah, 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 blah. And then now they suck, and now we're not hard enough. They want us to put Steve Pikiell on a stake or something. Like they want us to deport him. Like what do you want us to do? It's never enough for anybody. But it is
never enough.
It's the life we lead, fellas.
The life we lead could be ditch diggers. The world needs ditch diggers too.
I had one run in with a Rutgers wrestler who's still on the team, and just got hot over like coverage about being too negative, and but then it came full circle, and like we have a great relationship now. Like he apologized for his comments, and very interesting situation. Yeah.
Huh. Those wrestlers are interesting characters. I'm not shocked to hear this.
Clearly, since that's the other thing that's been consuming my life, is a wrestler who interesting character doesn't begin to describe what Anthony Knox that story has been for me and Pat for that matter. But we'll leave that for a separate podcast. All right, a couple more questions. Back to basketball before we wrap this up. Someone wants to know if Rutgers loses to Minnesota in the last game, which of the following does Pike raise first in his post-game press conference? A, how hard the players work. B, team GPA. C, consecutive sellouts. Or D, the band, cheerleaders, riot squad. I think it's C. I think it's E. I think he comes with it's on me. It's on me. I gotta be better. It's on me.
Yeah,
that's
the
one.
Say. That's exactly
what you were gonna say.
That's exactly
that's what it
is.
Yeah. So after that, your guess is as good as mine. But I think it's an on me one.
This would be such a fun off-season game. Steve Pikiell bingo. Just like all the hits.
We can sit there with cards and just move the thing.
I'll go with F. A tangent that somewhat touches on an excuse where he's like, senior day is different these years. There's no 4-year players. I've had these guys for 1 year. I'm unable to build my program. Just again, not directly saying it, but kind of saying it where you can interpret what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
But he'll certainly thank, or maybe the option is G, where he uses his seniors as sort of a human shield to deflect from the loss. Instead of talking about the game, he talks about having this year or two with these guys and the relationships they built off the court and all that's going to homeless shelters together and all those good things that they do.
Everything that Zach Martini did behind the scenes in his 1 year as captain. Yeah, okay, that could be it too. That's fair. And this is funny. I had to circle back on this because someone pointed it out. Listen to our show last week. One of the best questions was, what do you think is the funniest moment in Rutgers sports history? And we missed it. We didn't come up with what I think would beyond a shadow of a doubt number one on that list. And it is the "What's Your Name" press conference by Norris Wilson in Penn State when he's filling in for Kyle Flood. I still think back on that. At the time, it was funny. It's just gotten funnier. Like it's still the best one of the highlights of a press conference. And I just when he was randomly calling out people in that press conference, that is the funniest moment in Rutgers sports history. Thank you for whoever pointed that. Might have been Sarge. I forget who it was. Anyway, Yeah.
Another one that came up that we didn't talk about was Ryan Dunleavy's Saquon. It was right after Super Bowl too, right? Ryan Dunleavy's famous Saquon Barkley wouldn't have fit in this
crowded backfield.
Rutgers backfield. Yeah.
And he's been trying to make up for it ever since. Although I say, Ryan, like very few people have been right about something as Ryan Dunleavy was right about the second part of the Saquon Barkley experience, doubling down on the Giants, letting him go and him becoming, now the single most important offensive player in the NFL. Happened pretty quickly. So Ryan has made up for that tweet and then some in his second extension at the New York Post. All right. Anything else? What else we got? NFL Combine. Let's talk about that really quickly. We got the $500,000 match we got to talk about really quickly to see if people can donate $250,000 in a month when the basketball team is 14 and 16. That's going to be fascinating. What do you think? What do you think the chances are that they can't not make that amount of money, right? So it's $250,000 off the top, and if they get another $250,000, then it's a $500,000. It'll do a cool million. Am I understanding this correctly?
It's essentially a double match, right? So there's $250,000 on the table.
Right. Okay.
If Rutgers fans could collect $250,000 in one-time donations to the Knights of the Raritan and bring it the total up to $500,000, it unlocks a second match from the same original donor of $500,000. Wow. I shouldn't say the same original donor. I don't actually know the source of the extra $500,000, but it unlocks an extra $500,000 that is pledged on top of that.
Right.
So it'll become $1 million. Essentially, Rutgers fans can quadruple their money if they give $250,000.
This is like an NPR pledge. Do I get a tote bag for this too? It's like an NPR pledge drive now.
I think I know who the anonymous donor is. Stick with me here.
You know who it is?
The Rizzler.
Ooh,
the Rizzler.
The Rizzler. He has been coming to Rutgers events, and he makes a lot of money on TikTok.
Wow.
I can see that.
That would be something. If you could break that story, I'd read it. Why would the Rizzler want to keep that private? I think it seemed like he'd want to champion that.
It's because he's like 13 or 12.
Great.
But no,
it's so great.
I was just kidding because I've just heard a lot of Rizzler talk in the wrestling community because he showed up to the wrestling match and it was a big deal. Celebrity appearance.
If they do, he has to give 500,000 big booms. Just boom, boom, boom for every dollar that gets donated.
That's great.
On the combine, Robert Longerbeam made some money. Elite measurables and like broad jump, like really good drill work.
That track and field background. That's what it is.
Not surprised, and I'm not surprised that he would kill in the interviews too. Nothing about that surprises me with Robert Longerbeam. He's going to be a very good NFL player.
Holland Pierce's measurables were like shocking, like laughably shocking.
I saw that tweet. People were we're like just, oh my God, on that. Yeah.
I believe it was the second longest wingspan of any tackle since like 1999. Just cartoonishly big physically, which we all know, right? I don't think he did any of the on-field drills from what I can remember. And then Kyle Monangai didn't have great measurables as far as his 40. I think anyone that's watched Kyle Monangai play football know that the physicality, the speed isn't his thing. It's the toughness and the ability to grind out tough yards, which I don't know what the value of that is in the NFL in comparison to college, but I don't think I'm exactly surprised that his 40 isn't blazing.
Right. Yeah. Right now, if I give you over under 2.5 on draft picks, taking the over? No, you're not.
Nah.
You think it's gonna be 2?
Yeah, I think Pierce, maybe Monangai. Yeah.
But Longerbeams could get drafted, right? Am I wrong about that? No.
I think there's a lot of concerns about his size from what I read.
Yeah.
I think there's enough of these guys that are like flyer worthy in the 6th, 7th round.
Right.
If Holland Pierce, somebody has to take a chance on the guy, right? Like you have to.
He'd be stunned if he didn't get drafted.
Kyle Monangai, I think, has enough college production that I think a team will take him. And, Isaiah Pacheco factor, guy you take in the 7th round, which, I mean, talk about how brutal the NFL is. I read an article today about like how people are unsure about Pacheco's long-term future in Kansas City because he's getting hurt too much. He gets hurt 1 year, breaks his leg or whatever, comes back, and yet they're not sure they can. You go from a hero to maybe not even getting a second contract. It's pretty brutal in that league. Yeah. And then the third guy, between Tyrone Powell, who has great measurables and some really good tape from 23, Longerbeam, who has really good track numbers, right? And there's the Greg Schiano DB factor. And who's the fifth guy that went to Austin Riggs? I'm not sure they're going to sign a long snapper, so he's probably out. But I think they're just teams that are going to be smart enough to take a flyer on these guys in the last rounds.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna take the over on that too, and I think Greg Pisano's reputation helps Rutgers here. He has produced some late round guys who have become great, NFL players. I think that's gonna help him. All right, we don't have to talk about women's basketball. This is great. So people were wondering what did Brian? This is actually a question because you spaced out in the last podcast. You had a point to make, and then you didn't make it, and the three of us like whatever, Brian. We did. We moved on, but you remember what it was. And then you wanted to make the point here in case the 6 people were like, oh, good. I can finally hear what Brian's point was. And it was about, go ahead. Tell us, please.
What was it about again?
Oh, for crying out loud.
I'm joking. For the 6 people who are like me, who are just dying whenever this stuff like this happens, to know what was he thinking about. So Rutgers is changing its season ticket setup for basketball, where as far as I know, forever, it's always been opt-in. You have a season ticket, you want to renew your season ticket, you opt in to renew it. Now they're shifting to an opt-out model, where if you don't want to renew your season tickets, you have to go out of your way to not renew it. Highly convenient that this comes after the biggest, flop in program history, that you're now making people who would a lot of people would jump ship. Hundreds of people are considering probably jumping ship because there were probably hundreds of people that bought season tickets exclusively for this season. And now they're trying to pull the Planet Fitness gym model where you're going to siphon off money from people's bank accounts, and it's going to take them months to realize what's happening. Right. I don't like it at all. I understand a lot of programs do this. I understand it's probably the smart thing for Rutgers to do, right? To make the money. I think it's a little slimy. I'm not a fan of it. And I think that it's another move that's anti-fan. And I just think that when you're Rutgers, we don't have a fan base that's not Ohio State, Tennessee size. Tennessee has a waiting list of season tickets. You're Rutgers. You don't have a lot of people banging on your door for season tickets. I think the more pro-fan things you can do, the better. This is a huge step, I would say, in the wrong direction.
Can you do what I do with Sirius satellite radio, which is like I pay $12 and then they renew it like $39, and I call up and say I don't want to pay $39, and they go, okay, well we'll give it back to you for $12, and I've done this now 8 years. Can you do that with is it the same auto renew policy that I can? I don't think so. Probably not.
Probably not.
I think they'll charge you for the phone call, so you pay the season tickets and you pay an extra $100 on top.
An NIL donation on top of that. Yeah, all right. I don't have a problem with it. Everyone does it. It's whatever. It's actually, some people might think it's easier. You hate to forget to renew your tickets, right? I mean, Giants. Do the Giants do it? What are the pro teams? Pat, you have tickets for the
Giants. Yeah, same thing. You have to opt out, and I mean, to go through that process is insane too, because you have to give up your personal seat license as well. So that's a whole nother complex issue. Right. You're not getting your money back for that. So there will be no giving up these tickets for the Lanny family ever, no matter how bad it gets.
There's no convenience here, because let's say it would even be a favor for you to forget and not renew your Rutgers basketball tickets. Oh, I can't, I don't have a season ticket. Let me go look at StubHub. Oh, it's $8 to go watch Rutgers, Illinois with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. I'm going to save hundreds of dollars by doing that. So,
but no one wants to sit in those $8 seats. That's the problem, I think. Right?
Oh man. I mean, well, I don't know.
I'm a seat snob. Okay.
I don't know what to tell you. Watch it from home on TV. It's free.
All right, we've all calmed down. This was very therapeutic. I'm glad I got to yell on a podcast. I'm sorry if we were over the top negative, but we were fired up. I don't apologize. I take it back. We'll be back after, I guess, the Minnesota game to preview the Big Ten tournament, assuming either way, we'll be back after the Minnesota game. See you then. Thanks for listening.